Hi, welcome to this live stream here. What this is going to be is a discussion, as I noted on the AFK panel there. And what we're going to talk about are how to get into a different guild if you're looking at getting into a different guild for Legion. Now, it's a nice timely time to do this because 3 months away. I did do a separate video on specifically applying to a Mythic guild, but of course the way you apply to a Mythic guild is the same as you would apply to any guild. Some of the tips in there will work for anything. On the YouTube, when I upload this, I'll put a link to it on the annotation for anyone's interested in that. This is more about just thinking about how to track down a suitable guild, because some people will just look at guilds and they'll think it sounds nice, but that's based on what the guild says about itself. And when it comes to the application anyway, that should never be the first thing you're thinking about. I mean, applications are for mucks, or more specifically, just applying to a guild is rather silly. You should do some research first, especially when it's a time like now when maybe you're thinking of changing to another guild for Legion, and maybe you don't. Maybe you decide not to anyway. Maybe you decide you're okay with yours. But if you're even just thinking about it, it can take quite a long time, especially if you're not practiced, with finding out lots of things about a new guild. And this gives you the time to do it because you're not in any rush. You know, there are going to be guilds recruiting for the next few months. There will be guilds recruiting when Legion actually launches, because someone will, after months of only popping onto World of Warcraft every now and then, will suddenly decide that a raid schedule again is not for them. Maybe, you know, circumstances have changed, or they've just decided, you know, it's not worth it anymore. So spots will pop up even then. But of course, it's better to get in before, because then you can become established in the guild and get into the raid scene a bit more easily. So what we're going to do is consider some of the reasons. Now, if the reason is simply that either you find it difficult to compete for a raid spot in your current guild, maybe you have to think about a guild that's a little bit behind it in progress, or if you find yourself far too ahead of everyone else in terms of ability in your raid group, maybe you're thinking of one that's a bit better progressed. Those two cases are actually pretty simple, because you're just simply looking for a guild that's either a bit behind in progress or a bit ahead. All you have to do is try and find logs of their current roster and decide for yourself if you could compete with them. The only thing that can go wrong there is if you overestimate or underestimate your own value in a raid. Now, other reasons can be toxic behavior. So obviously, if you're in a guild that has a pretty shitty atmosphere, or it's just one that's not compatible with you, you don't feel comfortable, maybe there's lots of cliques in there and you don't feel welcome. So you want to move. Okay, move. But how do you know you're not moving to another guild with just as bad a situation? It is quite a difficult one to look. You can't see it in logs. You could look at videos that they upload. Maybe they've got the comms in the background, but does that necessarily tell you anything? It might not. Especially as videos that people upload will tend to be of kills, and people tend to be a little bit more chilled on them because things are going well. They end up killing it. So things are going pretty well for them. What you really want to know is what they are like at the height of the most pressure point of progress, when things are not going well, but perhaps people feel they should be going better than they are. So what are some ways you can look at this? What you can do is you could look at the guild. You could first of all look it up on WoW Progress. There are a couple of sites I'm going to sort of suggest, and I'll show you how to use those if you're not familiar with them in a bit. So on WoW Progress, you could look up the guild. Then what you can do is you can see members leaving and joining. Now, it's not a simple case of just saying, okay, have lots of members left. Have they got a high turnaround? Because remember, a lot of those names will just be alts or socials or something like that. You have to know that they're raiders. So what you'll need to do is find the people leaving. If it looks like there's a lot, check to see if they're raiders. Try and find them. If they're still on the same server, it's quite easy. Look at the armory. If it looks like they've got progress that's commensurate with that guild, then they may well have been raiders. Then what you want to do is to try and find out where they went. Now, if they've changed server, this isn't as simple as just looking on the armory, because they won't have an armory spot anymore. So there's another website called WoWTrack you can use, which will often quite accurately find out where they went. and then try and find their applications. Now, a lot of guilds, of course, don't have public application forums, but a fair number still do. And if you can find a couple, and one of the questions is always, why have you left your last guild, or why are you leaving your current guild? Have a look at the reason. And if the reason is shitty atmosphere there, or anything that sort of suggests that, then maybe you'd think to yourself, I might need to stay away from this. Obviously, if you happen to know people in that guild, if you're on the same server as them, they may well have a reputation as well, whether good or bad. So that can lead you to. Another one, which is a bugbear of mine, is poor use of data. Do the officers actually understand who is a good player and who is a bad player? And it can sometimes be surprising. Even some officers of well-progressed guilds might not actually know. They just almost get lucky with their personnel. But how do you know? I remember last summer when I was actually changing guild, and I applied to a guild and got knocked back because they'd just taken someone else on, so I got in a little bit late. But I looked at this person, I did a bit of check just out of curiosity, and I looked at their logs and I thought, this guy's terrible. It looked really good at first because you look at damage done, it was quite good. But then when you looked a bit deeper, you saw this person isn't attacking any priority mobs at all. They are just padding, all the way padding. And of course, that's not helping the boss die. One thing that's been really good about WoD raiding is that if you have people who pad, they are holding you back, because Blizzard have done a really good job of designing the raid fights in this expansion, and there are priority targets and you must nail them. So I thought, well, this is strange. They've obviously not spotted this. And I ended up, and also another thing that was a bit of an indicator is they'd been changing lots of guilds in about, they'd changed guilds about 8 times in like 7 months or something. 7 or 8 months. And the guild I ended up in, there's actually one I didn't, it was one that he had also joined. And they were telling me in that guild that they'd kicked him because all he was doing was meter whoring. And it was no surprise at all to me because I knew that. It was writ large in the logs. So if you join a guild where the officers are not very good at reading those logs, you could easily end up in a situation where you are very good at playing the mechanics and other people are not, and then they lord it over the people, because raw damage is shit, when you're the one who's actually killing that fight. And if you're in that situation, you could find it very frustrating. On the other hand, if you are someone who likes to pad and get away with not doing mechanics, then maybe that's the ideal sort of guild for you as well. Now, how do you find examples of that? Well, look at the logs of the guild. If you see evidence of people padding, especially where you really want to look is not on farm, because some people might be allowed to pad on farm anyway. What you want to look at is the point at which they were killing that boss. So find on WoW Progress when they killed some of the more difficult bosses, especially bosses where the opportunity to pad existed, and then go to their logs at round about that same time. So try and find the night they killed it and look at the logs on that night where they were wiping, and maybe the night before. And if you see people padding, then it's quite likely the officers are not spotting it. So they're not very good at reading those logs, because at that point, if they haven't sorted out anyone who was doing that, then that's a bit worrying. Schedule could be another reason. What's your raid schedule like? If circumstances have changed, you've got a new job or something like that, maybe you can't meet the raid schedule of the guild you're currently in. Or maybe you can make a larger one. Maybe you're currently in, say, a weekend guild because that's all you could manage before, but a change of circumstances have meant that weekends, evenings, are free, and maybe you can switch. You've got a wider range of guilds that you can actually apply to. So you might be thinking in terms of that, again, usually to step up to higher progress or just to get more raiding in. Again, WoW Progress can help you out on things like that. So what I'm just going to do, for those who aren't familiar with these websites, is I'm just going to show you how we would use these ones. So let me just get this right. So let's say you are a rogue, and let's say you want to be Alliance, because who wouldn't? You're not a gnome rogue though, that's very important. We'll just put in any for now, even if you have a specific number of raids you want to meet. The problem with this is, if, like, say you put 5 in, you might be fine with 4 or 3 as well. So we'll just put any for now, language, English, whatever it happens to be, and you want people who are recruited. Excuse me. A rogue. And just click go. Now, there's a few things here. The filters are not perfect when it comes to WoW progress. So it can take a little bit of time. There's a few things to note. First of all, it mixes up all the different areas. So OC, EU, US. So you'll have to sort of mentally get rid of ones you're not applying to. So let's say you're thinking about EU. Now you'll notice some of these, especially at this time, just because they've come up here when you've put all this in, doesn't mean to say they're looking for a rogue. So if we click on one just for an argument, Malorum is a respected guild. You'll note they're recruiting all classes, so no matter what you put in, that's going to come up there. So don't be caught out by that one. So you may have to click through a few. The other thing to note is that some of these will be on PvP servers, some of them on PvE servers, whatever type. If you've got a specific type of server you have in mind, then you need to consider that as well. Okay. And what you're basically going to do with this is try to find some guilds that you think, okay, these sort of guilds might be interesting, and then you want to do some further investigation. So find their logs. If they're a raiding guild, they will have logs there somewhere. Usually it's in the bump. I mean, read the stuff by all account that they write about themselves, but usually, and it's rather pointless, I think, for this, in my opinion, usually what they do is they write a load of stuff about how the guild first formed, as if that matters, especially if it was years ago, who cares? But what you're most interested in the schedule. Now, very, very careful about this, because I know at the moment there are some guilds who say their raid schedule is such and such. So let's say there are some guilds at the moment whose raid schedule they're saying is 3 days a week, because that's what it has been. But if you read the comments, it says that they're going to step it up to 4 days a week when Legion launches. Now, you could argue that what they should really be doing is saying that in their post, but they're not doing at the moment. So just check. The other thing you should also do is, once you've found a guild that you think you want to apply to, don't apply to it even at that point. What you want to do is to contact an officer. Now, most reputable guilds, the officers will put their battle tag in, but if they don't, just make a character on that server, if it's on a different server, and just wait for one to come online and talk to them. It's very important to talk to them and check out anything. Don't make any assumptions about the guild at all. Make no assumptions. Ask them about how many days they're going to be doing in Legion. And another thing as well, if days is a thing for you, let's say you can only make 4 days a week, and you look at this guild and they do 4 days a week, and they do the 4 days that you can make. Ask them what they're going to be doing at the start of each tier, because some guilds might say do 4 days a week, but they might do 6 days a week for the first 2 or 3 weeks, because what you've got, especially mythic guilds, have got, you don't get tier gear in the first raid in Legion, just like we didn't in WoD. Nonetheless, just the item level of the gear will make us more powerful, so it makes it easy to make DPS checks for a start. So you know, you can wipe a week or 2 off the time it takes you to progress through the whole thing, just by doing that. So do check that. Check on times as well. Again, the times they will give you are their normal raid times. Ask if they ever extend, because once funneling that gear in early cannot be overstated. I mean, the guild I was in through most of Warlords of Draenor, we didn't do split run, say, at the start of Blackrock Foundry, and we suffered for it. We really did suffer for it, because it was ages before we were getting tier gear on everyone. And even though you don't get tier gear in the first raid in Legion, just like we didn't in WoD, nonetheless, just the item level of the gear will make us more powerful. So it makes it easy to make DPS checks for a start. So you know, you can wipe a week or 2 off the time it takes you to progress through the whole thing. Just by doing that. So do check that. Check on times as well. Again, the times they will give you are their normal raid times. Ask if they ever extend, because if it's an issue with you, let's say you're looking at the times and you're thinking, okay, yeah, I can raid up to that time, but I really need to get to bed at that time. Ask them if they ever extend, because if they do and you're thinking, well, actually that's my upper limit, what they're saying. If it's any more than that, I can't do it. The other thing is, look at the start time. Don't get into a situation where you look at the start time and think, okay, well, I get home from work, it's about this. If I grab a quick sandwich and get online. I can just about make it for that start time. That's not actually good, because what they don't want is you just logging on 1 minute before the start time, especially if you're not ready. So think to yourself, you need a good amount of time. You really always need to think, are you going to be ready to go 1/4 of an hour before the start time? Comfortably as well, not in a rush. If the answer is no, you do need to be realistic about the times you can make it, because you're not going to be any good to anyone if you're frazzled. Now, the other website I said I would show you is WowTrack. So hopefully you can see this. It's the first time I've done something with websites on this. So let's say you're, as I mentioned before, you need to track some individuals, maybe to ask them directly why they left the guild, or maybe to try and do it more surreptitiously by finding applications they made to the guild they went on to as to the reason why they left the guild. So what you can do with this, now if I type my name in, I'm not going to pick on anyone. So we go here, this is where I am at the moment. So that's me. How dare there be other feats? How dare there? Right, there we go, that's me. What on earth is that? So what you can see here is you can see where I have been before. I don't know, like, Hornetto is a completely separate paladin I have. This is bizarre. But you can see where I've been for the last several years. So what you can see the guilds that I've been in as well. So you'd be able to track where someone had gone. I mean, let's say I was putting in who was in at that point when I'd only just moved. You'd find out hopefully where I'd moved to, and then you can find applications that I've made if it was done publicly. I mean, as I say, a lot of guilds, they're not done publicly, but even if it's not, you could always make a character on the realm they went to and just ask them why they left, if you are suspicious that the reason they left is because it's a shitty atmosphere. Okay. If you've got any questions, by the way, again, feel free to ask here, or if you've got questions, if you're watching this on YouTube, you've got questions, put those in the comments below. I'll get back to you on that one as well. Okay, so that covers, oops, sorry, still using this. Gordon Bennett, there we go, nice of a background. So that covers some of the main reasons why you would want to leave. Now, the reason why I say now is a really good time to do this is because we've got 3 months till it launches, maybe a month and a half before the pre-expansion patch. Some of these investigations can take some time, but what you should do is first of all plan out what do you want out of a guild, make your wish list, and then how are you going to find this out about a number of guilds. Then find a number of guilds you'd be happy with, and again you might have to consider, are you willing to realm transfer? Of course, the higher up you're aiming to go, the more likely you are to realm transfer. If you are just getting into raiding, for example, let's say you've only been doing LFR, maybe some pug raids, and you want to get into an organised raiding guild, then there should be no reason to transfer realm. You should find plenty of guilds that are like normal heroic guilds that you'd be able to join in Legion, and if you find that you're well above their level anyway, it doesn't stop you moving on after a two. I mean, don't move, like hop around too much, because then that shows up on your record, because the tools I've just shown you there, recruitment officers use the same tools, and if it looks like you're constantly on the move, that's a bit of a warning sign to good guilds. And if it's not a warning sign, they don't pick on it, they're not a good guild. They're certainly not a thorough guild. So make a list of everything you expect from the guild you're going to. Make a list of how you're going to find these things out. Practice looking at logs. If you're not well practiced at reading logs, do practice that. Have a look at them. Make sure you can know what the priority targets are. Check who's doing those. See if you can find evidence of padding, because that is an indicator that people, the people in the guild, either aren't strong on it or just not aware of it. And both is bad. Both is pretty bad, actually. Have a look to see if they're constantly changing their roster, because again, if they're, one of the key things for progress is stability of the roster. You know, I keep saying, like, the difference between the World 100th guild and the World 300th, there's not a great deal in it. All of those sort of guilds between 1 and 300-ish, that's just a ballpark figure, are pretty close to each other. They'll all be pretty serious to an extent. They'll all have really good players in it, top players in it. Sometimes the difference is just roster stability, or a key player leaves at the wrong time and they can't replace them very quickly. or just something really simple. Or maybe they've got a couple of people in their padding and it's not been checked on, and maybe a guild that was higher up weren't checking the logs either, but maybe they just happened to have people that decided to behave themselves on progress and pad on farm. So think about that as well. Think about your reasons for moving, and also make sure that you are sure about your own worth, because you don't want to think you're better than you are and end up going to a guild that's too high progress and you end up on the bench. At the same time, you don't want to underestimate your own value and end up going to another guild where also you're not happy because they're not making as much progress as you feel they should. And don't rush into it, and don't, make sure you go through all the investigations, check all the things, raid atmosphere, what are the officers like, how do they seem, what's the progress like, are you happy with that progress? And don't just look at their progress for, say, Hellfire Citadel. There's been 3 raid instances in WoD alone. Check their progress on each one, because they may have just hit a sweet spot. Sometimes you get guilds that hit a sweet spot. You look at their world ranking over a number of tiers, and it's sort of, it's certain level, so it goes really high. They get a really good rank, and then it goes back down to being a bit more modest. Or it might be the other way around. They might have, certain rank, and then just have a really bad tier because just something happened. They lost their main tank and couldn't get another regular one for like a month or something, because that's a pretty big deal. A tank that's not there 100% of the time is a problem. So have a look at that as well. If you are applying as a healer, of course, it'll be very important that it's a proper team. The healer team is a proper team, just like the tanking team. DPS, I think, less so. DPS just need to do their jobs. There's very little coordination between them other than the way the raid leader coordinates the whole team. But within a healing team, there is proper communication. So, ask to speak to the healing officer, talk to them a little bit about how they do things, make sure you're okay with that. If it's for a tanking position, talk to the tank, your partner tank, and again, make sure that you'll be comfortable with them, because you're going to have to have a really good relationship with those. Again, for people who have just joined here, if you've got any questions, by all means, just ask them in there. What we're discussing is, we're coming to the end actually, but discussing reasons for leaving your guild for Legion, and the fact that you have a lot of time to do it, and you need to plan out what you want of a guild and spend the time researching it. I'll be posting this up on YouTube, so if you've missed the first part, you'll be able to watch that later. It will, of course, still be on my Twitch site as well to watch for a week or so. And though that's pretty much what I would say. Now, in terms of other things that I'll be streaming tomorrow, there is a new build, a Legion build, beta, sorry, going up at the moment. So there may be some changes to that. So I'll be streaming that at 10 o'clock tomorrow UK time. There is another little series I'm going to be starting. Now we're coming to the end. As people know, my Archives of Warcraft series is getting quite close to the end now. There are 3 more dungeons I want to do. There are another few I may do. It all depends really on how much interest there is. But there are certainly 3 more I want to do that then I will feel it's a nice tidy amount. Unfortunately, that would also make 13. I'm not superstitious, but some people are. But there are another couple after that. After that, it'll probably be on hiatus for a little bit, because further, I mean, I've got plans for a lot of, similar types of content, but all of them are fairly substantial projects. So I certainly couldn't do one a week on. And as we get closer to Legion, I'll be starting to do more guides for Legion as well. So that'll put that on the back burner. It's not exactly like I'm a big enough YouTuber to be able to get away with doing them for Patreon or anything like that instead, and earning some dollary too, so that's not on. So it's probably going to be, I will do those every now and then, but there is another series I have coming out, which I can do at the rate of 1 week, which will also be fairly interactive. So there'll be more on that later. But effectively, it's going to be a series of top 10s, which I'll bring out every couple of weeks. The first one I bring out, I will just do as a video just to show the idea. But at the end of it, I'll direct people towards a poll for the next topic's top 10 and let people sort of vote on their favourite or whatever it happens to be for that. So the order will be determined by the community and not by me. But I will just argue for them. Other thing I'll be covering is I am very, very close to starting some guides, and I have a week off next week after watching the Warcraft movie. It's on Monday. Hooray. Heard so many good things. I'm looking forward to it immensely. So yeah, I'm going to be starting some guides for the things that I think are set in beta at the moment. So those will be coming out quite soon, and then they will slowly come out, so that there'll actually be quite a big suite of them by the end of August. And that's going to be a large focus of mine as well. But as always, if people want me to talk about anything specific, whether it's to do with Warcraft Live or Warcraft in beta, or a particular class or spec or whatever, anything to do with the things that I talk about, you know what I talk about. If you don't, check out my channel on YouTube and have a look through the sort of content I do, then put that in as well. I do requests, and if there's no questions, until next time, I'll see you later. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if this has gone up on YouTube, and comments below on anything you want me to do or any sort of suggestions. Yeah, bye.